it's time for Asians Read L5R. Asians Read, the show where we read through good and bad TTRPGs that feature Asian representation. And we do it all for your entertainment and education. I'm joined by some amazing folks, and I don't think I express how much I appreciate being able to chat with you and Sar, who couldn't be with us today, every Friday. We've been doing this for, I think this is episode 19? Episode 19 or 20? This series has officially gone longer than our Oriental Adventure series. And you know what? I've really honestly enjoyed reading this like L5R book. I think there's some really cool things in here. I think there are some things that I would never touch. But I've enjoyed this far more than I enjoyed reading Oriental Adventures. But before we start, we have a couple of announcements. The first one is that there's a new episode of the podcast out right now. So if you hit up Asians Represent on iTunes, Spotify, Google Podcasts, and then there's some of the other recasters out there as well, we have a new episode of Asians Represent, and we talked to Yilin Wang, who is a writer and scholar of wuxia. We did a whole episode finally on wuxia and a little bit of xianxia, which is like Chinese fantasy. That podcast blew my mind. So if you haven't listened to it yet, if you're not subscribed, Steve, you beat me to it. If you're not subscribed, check it out. Steve just dropped the link if you're watching it live. Right now, we did an episode of wuxia. It's like an hour and 20 minutes worth of educational content on how to, or if it's possible to, include Asian martial arts fiction and its tropes into your tabletop RPGs. I thought it was a fantastic episode. I really loved editing it, and I'm sorry it took so long to actually put out that episode. And the reason why it took so long to put out that episode was because we just did a big rebrand. So if you're watching on Twitch, if you go to our Twitter page, go to our Facebook page, go to our Instagram, Asians Represent went through a complete rebrand, and we have a new logo. We have a brand manual now, and this will allow us to better work with other companies to make sure that the companies we work with know our values and know how to use our branding in whatever we do with them. So very excited about that. That said, when we announced the rebrand and shared the logo, everybody on our Discord was like, "Oh my God, look at that Noodle Dragon!" And I don't know if it was you, Steve, who called it the Noodle Dragon, or I feel like, or Emma, or I know you were in the conversation, but there was this big talk about our Noodle Dragon, our Noodly Dragon, and the D6. And so, what we want to do is we need to figure out a name for this Noodle Dragon. So if you have an idea for a name, throw it in our chat or tweet at us. Oh, that's right. Steve said send noodles or something like that.
Send nudes.
Send nudes.
Yeah, the Noodle Dragon is named nude, and the command to type it in is send_nudes.
Thanks, Steve.
You're very welcome. This is why I'm here.
So we have Noodle Dragon. The reason why I want us to name Noodle Dragon is because I want to incorporate Noodle Dragon into our next series. Last week we voted for It's Friday / Keep Trying.
Keep trying.
But I might make the executive decision to call it the Wrap Up. But I wanted to frame it around the symbolism of like dumplings and other Asian foods that feature wrappings. So that was the idea with the Wrap Up. I know that
Why even ask?
Why even ask? No. I do want to know what everyone thinks. So let us know. Let us know what you want us to call Noodle Dragon, or do we just keep it Noodle Dragon? And do you like It's Friday, or do you like the Wrap Up, or do you want us to keep trying? That series will start soon because we're almost done L5R. So yeah.
One thing that I really was interested in for the wrap up was that I thought, because oftentimes we kind of lean into the Far East, usually Chinese kind of representation side of Asians Represent. I wanted to really look into dumplings and the wrapping of food in shells and the various ways to cook them, steam them, fry them. And it looks like it's actually one of the ones that's like incredibly ubiquitous.
Well, that's what I was thinking. I didn't come up with that name. Apparently, it was Pam.
It was,
Apparently
yeah.
It was Pam who came up with that name. I love it for that reason, and we could even get multiple logos or multiple icons made from around the world, and we could have different kinds of wrapped foods with our Noodle Dragon. So I really like that. We got all steamed up. That's not bad, but I don't think steaming food is universal or a universal common cooking technique.
If only we had anthropologists, archaeologists.
It's one of the primary ways to cook.
I'm retired. But yeah, that's we're gonna do that soon. So stay tuned for.
I think you should just call him a Noodle Dragon. Just
Noodle Dragon.
No, the Noodle Dragon. Just
the
call him
Noodle Dragon.
Yeah.
It has to have.
If we do that, then we could still do send nudes as the command. So I mean, I'm in
still
favor.
do send nudes. Is our merch gonna be? Because we're gonna do a design with Heart of the Unicorn. Is it going to be Noodle Dragon?
The new logo would look great on the t-shirt. Just saying, I still want to have that moment where I'm wearing this on a shirt and I'm walking through Brooklyn and I see someone else across the street and we have a moment.
You have a moment. Yeah. Well, I like the idea of that logo on a dad hat. I really like
dad hat,
yeah.
or beanie, or sneakers. Down for the sneakers. Down for the cool kicks.
Or the merch could be send nudes. We'll figure it out. But anyways, people aren't here for us to chat about Noodle Dragon, or maybe you are in the future. We're here to talk about how you can dramatize Bushido. So we're reading the GM chapter. Where did we leave off last time? Because we talked about evoking Legends of the Five Rings setting. We talked about that one paragraph and all of the problems that kind of came of it.
Go check out your local East Asia stuff.
Yeah, go check out your local festival and museum.
Yeah. I assume there's questionable things within the NPC characterization.
Yeah, I had highlighted that.
I actually tweeted about this one. We didn't get to it last time.
So why don't we start with that? I'll read bringing NPCs to life, and then we'll frame our conversation around that.
Yeah.
Sure.
Okay. So bringing NPCs to life. Many of the same principles used for describing locations can be applied to non-player characters as well, including giving texture to their appearance and mannerisms. What is their style of dress, hair, and facial hair? What colors, fabrics, accessories, and perfumes do they wear? Do they maintain perfect posture? Do they slouch? Or do they have a limp or nervous tic? Where can they usually be found, and what do their surroundings say about their personality? What player character personality traits might cause PCs to scrutinize qualities of an NPC or see them in a more favorable light? NPCs have another dimension to consider, which is their dialogue. GMs can always narrate an NPC's words, but many find it extremely rewarding to speak as though they were that character. Some of the most basic ways to vary a character's voice are to give them different emotions or levels of energy. A GM who feels comfortable portraying accents might give peasants and sailors a more freewheeling style of pronunciation, but players should steer clear of accents that invoke stereotypes or caricatures of East Asian cultures. That's great. Cool. Beyond varying the pitch, tone, and speed of NPC speech, GMs can do a lot to differentiate characters with diction, word choice, and poetic flourishes. A literary and refined character will use more polysyllabic words and complex sentence structures. For groups that speak English in their games, the GM might use words with Latin and Greek roots to characterize nobility, reserving shorter and simpler words of Anglo-Saxon origin for more practical characters. Samurai, besides those of the Crab Clan, are much more apt to speak in simile and metaphor, use personification, or make allusions to nature. A wealth of East Asian poetry is available in translation online and in libraries, which can inspire and delight GMs who are interested in the aesthetics and ethos of these cultures and historical periods. Wow, there's a lot to talk about there.
Emma, your face says it all. I feel like
I'm thinking things.
thinking things. Okay.
Yeah.
I have immediate thoughts because I've already had time to ruminate on this. But Jerry,
I have some thoughts on the accents bit. Like when I GM games, I do a lot of accents. I do change voices a lot. However, I appreciate how they say be wary of racist Asian accents, because accents are one of those things that there are kind of there are many different accents out there, and some accents are associated with a particular type of racism, and you really need to be careful. Like I lived in Hong Kong for 6 years, and I can speak like Hong Kong English, and I've done that with friends sometimes, but bringing that into a game, if I'm trying to portray like a Chinese character, particularly if I'm playing with other people who might not be of Asian descent, that comes across as quite wrong and quite unusual, and they might find it funny, and they might think it's okay to take that accent and use it outside of the game. Same thing if you're playing a black character and you start using a lot of slang, or start trying to talk like you're in like a stereotypical music video or something, that really veers towards dangerous territory. So I think it's good to encourage people to use their theatrics, but also to encourage them to be very careful of what sort of accents you're trying to play as, particularly if you're portraying a character of color.
Yeah. And then there's like the whole bit where they're like, for groups that speak English in the gamers, use Latin and Greek roots or Anglo-Saxon origin. Like what? Like what? Like you couldn't look for a Japanese equivalent?
So I think this is a really great time to talk about how, when it comes to languages that are this divergent, equivalency is probably like a fool's errand. You can get it sometimes, but oftentimes there's nuance in how the language is written and spoken and how it's understood, and you can see this a lot in like the East Asian languages, as well as all other languages compared to English. So I feel that this has really set up GMs and players up for failure, because if you watch any Chinese coded movies on Netflix and whatnot, you will see, if ever you put on the English subtitles with the English dialect, you'll see that they're actually quite different, and it's very jarring and difficult to understand. But that's because it is the people who are translating trying really hard to match it one-to-one and basically getting various degrees of success.
Yeah, I think with this one as well, they excuse me, this is a missed opportunity to talk about honorifics, which is something that they've used inconsistently throughout the rest of the book. We talked about that in a previous episode. They could have talked about honorifics here.
But then they would have had to have fixed themselves.
But then they would have had to fix the previous things. But we're talking about how this book can improve. And that is this would be the perfect spot to talk about it. If we were to keep the existing structure of L5R, they would have to go through and include those honorifics, but this would have been where they should put it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But like with what we have here, I don't understand the Latin and Greek root versus Anglo-Saxon origin. That seems like a very strange linguistic thing to put in here. Why don't you just say like certain groups like nobility or the academics are going to use ridiculous words that aren't that common, and everyone else is going to just speak. If you want to make a distinction, like I don't understand using Latin and Greek as Anglo-Saxon as an example here to help people. Like, how does this help?
I don't think anyone understands. Like, what are simpler words of Anglo-Saxon origin?
Nobody playing L5R does that. I think it's far more likely that you have a group of 5 white people playing this game, all referring to each other as Sama or Chan or Kun, like with Japanese honorifics on the
Yeah, I mean, for sure.
I feel like there's somebody's English degree is poking out. From this
or I don't know. It's like this is like a misguided attempt to be like, I know what the audience wants. they want this point of reference that I understand. Everybody must know Latin and Greek.
So because we have a great resource here, Monty, I'd like to ask you a question.
And if you can, and I will say, if you can answer, Monty, you don't have to answer
if you can. But let's say like we have this sentence that's going to be spoken by NPCs, and it's like, the quick fox jumps over the lazy brown dog, something like that. Would there be like a style guide situation that says like a crab clan would say it this way, and like a peasant would say it this way, and like is there guidance as to how you actually write that?
So generally, yeah, I think most RPG companies should have a style guide, but generally they note like how the text is supposed to sound, not like dialogue.
I see.
I'm trying to decide how much I can say. I have asked for guidance about how characters are supposed to talk in L5R. I try my best to vary it a bit. So I've written the opening fiction for Path of Waves and the opening fiction for Celestial Realms. And writing dialogue is kind of interesting because they're supposed to be kind of aristocratic. So there's this tendency to not use conjunctions, right?
Gotcha. Right? Yep.
So there's a little bit of interplay there, right? So like I have to show, hey, this person is from an aristocratic class. But also there's a tendency to make it also sounds kind of stiff. And so like there's been times, for example,
I hate that for Asian characters. I hate it.
Yeah.
It's a trope.
For me, sometimes I will throw a conjunction or a contraction. Sorry, I don't know why I said conjunction.
Contraction.
When, like, for example, they're about to be attacked or something like that. So like they'll fall to you want to shorten language when you really need to shout out something really quickly. And so for me, it's an interesting kind of balance to try to adhere to the trope that the project is supposed to showcase, but then also try to make them sound as human as possible.
Fighting against stereotypes with contractions. Good on you, Monty. Good on you.
Doing the Lord's work.
I mean,
one contraction at a time.
Path of Waves is easy because everyone is supposed to be like a non-samurai, so everybody's like slang is everywhere. But I say Celestial Realms, I'm sure somebody can read that short story and tell me whether or not I screwed it up.
I really want to read Path of Waves. I really want to read that.
When we get to the final episode, that's probably going to be a takeaway. But
the takeaway is go get Path of Waves.
But
I just hate the trope of Asians, and you see this in so many media. We've talked about this before. Asians not using contractions, being formal and stiff. Really playing into those ideas of Japanese culture specifically, maybe Chinese culture as well, like being very, very formal. But I think it's a remnant of like the '80s Japanese bubble, like Japanese businessmen being formal and like we're gonna communicate this by having them speak formally and not using contractions. I just don't like it because it gives across this image that Asian people do not speak like regular people.
Yes.
Yeah, it's a way of creating another.
You see it in comics, you see it in TV shows, cartoons, you see it everything.
And then a lot of it has to do with translation.
Yeah.
I've been thinking that like when you're speaking Japanese, it's just normal conversation and interaction, but it translates strangely into English because let's be honest, English is a really strange language in its own right. So things get all messed up. But what was it? I had one other point about language for this section, but I don't know if there's.
Well, for me, it was like the only time they tell you to go look at Asian references or to go look at poetry.
Yeah, that's
like to learn about. They're like go read poetry because everything there is. I think they say. Like that is the aesthetic of the culture and the period and how people speak. And it's what?
I'm just imagining a whole group for a 4-hour session all talking haikus.
Yeah.
Like
that tanka,
that hurts me.
I wonder if they specifically mention poetry because haikus are well known in the mainstream. I feel like that's the only reason.
That's the thing. They go through all of this effort to be like, talk about different tone and pronunciation, use Latin and Greek roots, the Anglo-Saxon stuff, and then go read Asian poetry. And it's not even like Japanese poetry, it's like East Asian poetry. What?
Chinese poetry is very different from
So
Japanese
different.
poetry. Korean poetry is very different from Japanese poetry.
And across time periods as well.
Yeah.
Of course.
Right.
Yeah. And then some of that, like, they're drawing on poetry when I think they're trying to distinguish how Crab Clan speaks differently from everyone else. And this is where some of my very minimal anthropological linguistic stuff is going to come in. And that almost all communication uses simile and metaphor, personification and allusions to the world around us, because otherwise we have no way of actually communicating very complex and abstract things. So I don't know how Crab Clan communication would look if it didn't have at least metaphor and simile.
That part kind of like super blew me away, because everyone speaks in simile and metaphor. The amount of times we've said stuff like, stuff is wild, stuff is like coming out of left field. Like, we do this all the time. That's a lot. Like that. These are all similes and metaphors, even though they're so common, we don't see them as much, but they are.
I mean, they could have said that like Crab Clan members, or members of the Crab Clan who spend so much time beyond the wall or on the wall don't have time for small talk, and that doesn't necessarily dictate like the tone in which they speak or anything like that. It just says like, hey, they don't want to talk about this stuff because they've seen some shit.
Or I think it would be really cool if every clan, if they are so different, used different metaphors and similes to make sense of the world around them.
Oh, that's
because this could make for some interesting communication and interactions. Like, how do you make sense of that? Like,
or even linguistic taboos, words that are offensive to different clans, since they appear to have such distinct cultures.
I mean, I wish Sar was around so I could ask him this, but maybe Monty, you can answer it too. Is there anything in like the kind of Rokugan, rule book of how to write for this game that talks about the difference, like literacy rates in Rokugan, like whether groups of people, some of them are, can't read, or whether the nobility speaks. I'm thinking in terms of like how classical Chinese was touted in history, and the educated class of China often will speak in something that's very incomprehensible and very different from what modern Chinese now. Are there like linguistic differences there, or is it just like use honorifics here and have your peasants don't use honorifics
and no contractions?
And no contractions.
Yeah, I haven't run into that.
Because I think from a lore building perspective, being like, okay, maybe educated members of the Crane, when in court, they actually speak a very different type of Rokuganese or whatever it is that they speak, and then I don't know, maybe talk about where you got inspiration for that idea. Talk about classical Chinese, talk about classical Japanese, But I think that's too far in depth for
that's
this
a little
book
bit
to really go into.
Yeah.
I think
Go read some poetry.
Sorry, Monty, what were you going to say?
Oh, well, I mean, so there's novellas out, right? That
Yeah.
Each one tackles the different clans. And I guess it would be interesting to see, again, I wish we had Sar here, to see if like the characters speak differently in each of those novellas, right? But I get the impression they probably don't.
If there's no style guide specifically on how people should have dialogue, I imagine that it's kind of like a filtering of this trope that is the seed of it, and it kind of grows throughout the artist's mind, knowing that it can't stray too far from the seed.
It's also the novellas; those authors might get a different style guide than
that's also
the
possible. Yeah.
RPG department does. So.
Well, just thinking, like, what about are there RPGs that you've played that have done language and speech well? Right, like D&D doesn't really address it. It's just like everybody speaks common, which is it's great that they didn't say English.
But you can run into situations where like the different species speaking different languages leads to interesting scenarios within the game. Like you might not understand something because it's in like Giant or it's in Orcish or whatever. And if you play D&D on I think like Fantasy Grounds, and maybe some other virtual tabletops, when you read something on the virtual tabletop that is in another language that your characters don't understand, it'll be presented in the chat in like kind of incomprehensible, Elvish or Dwarvish, whatever, which is kind of interesting. Like you can play around with that. Like language is such a fascinating thing, and it should lead to so many interesting engagements within game. D&D usually results to like, oh, they speak common and you speak common, so you're good.
So you're good.
My favorite language simulator is World of Warcraft beta.
Oh,
before it was released.
Yeah, I remember.
And it was the worst system. It was bad for games. It was a bad game system. But they tried something very, very, I think, innovative. I think EverQuest also did it, but World of Warcraft was more popular, so I'm going to talk about that. But if you spoke two different languages, so if you were a human who spoke common and you're talking to dwarves, you couldn't speak the same language to start off with. Level 1, your texts would come across each other through a machine that would just garble it up. But as you talked more to each other, more and more words would actually translate correctly. So as you started, you might pick up 0 words, but on your second message, you might pick up 1. And then as time goes on, maybe 2. And as time goes on, eventually the hope was you would talk together enough that the whole sentence would be fully translated. And that is shitty to play through.
I remember it. It was just like random English. No, just random letters just smashed together, wasn't it?
Yeah. It was just through a codex where it was like L equals M, like that kind of like weirdness. But it was consistent at least. So you could actually, as a player, also translate it using a translator. But within the interface itself, your character could not understand it until such time passed that you experienced enough of the language, and it's terrible. It's so bad for communication because you lose all the nuance of what it means to communicate thoughts to each other beyond just written word. But the idea that you have to like get it piece by piece, and sometimes what you get is what you get, that's novel. And I don't think there's any tabletop RPG that's touched it. To my knowledge, but I would be very much interested to see that.
I mean, I think the only good TTRPG that handles language is Dialect, but that game is about languages, like the creation and death of languages. It's a really beautiful game. I wish I could just go. I guess I would go down and run and grab it. But Dialect is an incredible game. If you're just interested in language, I'll share a link in the chat.
It's funny that you mentioned World of Warcraft, Steve, because playing World of Warcraft in Taiwanese PC cafe.
Oh yeah, Monty, nice.
Was what improved my Chinese, like my Chinese reading, my knowledge of like slang, like playing with because we were playing on Taiwanese servers, and like my knowledge of Chinese typing slang just improved immensely from just only being able to play in Chinese. So,
I had 2 more thoughts on this section. I know we're really like extending this out, but there's a lot to say about language and representation. I was going to start with code switching, but actually Chat, I think, did a really good job of talking about how code switching is a difficult thing to write down. And this book reasonably has chosen not to talk about code switching, despite the fact that I think anyone who exists in a marginalized space understands whether or not you call it code switching, that code switching exists. Depending on who you speak to, you're going to speak in different ways. And that is absolutely valid and a very human thing to do. It's a shame they didn't talk about it here. But what I did want to spend a little bit more time on was the idea that the text explicitly said, don't do an East Asian accent. And we talked a little bit about accents and whatnot. And that's wonderful. But what I wanted to talk about was that when I made the tweet, I was like, I really like that part, don't do an East Asian accent. People were like, accents are a very crucial part of my D&D, my RPG game. I do accents all the time. And I was like, you're right. I should have been more nuanced about this. And it's the fact that East Asian accents, specifically in this context, are a vector of microaggressions. And I really like this text had called out, don't do it. But I think they could have gone one step further and actually contextualized it, where it's like, you shouldn't do it because it perpetuates a system of oppression, such and such and such. It is different than doing, let's say, like an English accent. Like if you did an English accent, chances are, even if it's really, really bad, no one's going to feel excluded from your group. No one's going to have a piece of past trauma kind of triggered into them to the extent that someone might have experienced trauma from having an East Asian accent. So,
yeah, I think there's a difference between what the folks on Critical Role do when they do voices and accents, and when you're doing a voice and doing an accent that you associate with a stereotype. And a negative stereotype is that there's like, oh yes, I'm just going to use this voice, and then there's, oh hiya, Uncle Roger. There's like there are 2 different things, right? Yes, you could be playing a character both times, but one character, depending on who is playing it, it can cause a lot of harm at the table.
I think context matters too, and who you're playing with
Super.
matters. Is it a home game? Is it a stream game? Like, who's your audience? Like, you know, there's. And as far as Uncle Roger goes, I'm kind of getting tired of him, quite honestly.
He peaked at his first video.
Yeah, that's a whole other thing. That's a whole other thing to deal with.
Yeah.
But then what do you do? What do you do if it's an Asian person who wants to do that accent?
Context matters. When I was in Hong Kong, I was playing with all Asian people, and we all lived in Hong Kong. Some of them would speak Hong Kong English to each other. You know, some of them were playing characters that they saw as Asian, but that's a very unique scenario. If you're playing in a streamed game, say in North America, with non-Asian people, then you're running into a completely different set of worms. And another thing is, can you do an Asian accent that does not come across as an offensive stereotype? Because there's differences between an actual Asian accent and just exaggerated, you know, slurring of vowels and words that, you know,
well, it's like that RL
you've
switch.
Assimilated from racism, pretty much.
It's the RL switch that they literally put in that Gaijin disadvantage.
Yeah. And like, this section is specifically talking about NPCs, right? Not more developed characters that other individuals are playing through, which has similar problems. But for these NPCs, like, there's a difference between a character and a caricature, which I think is just a summary of what we've been talking about. And those caricatures are where we get into, like, you're leaning into stereotypes to get certain ideas across about these NPCs. And it's, I think, to say, like, we're in an, like, Japan-inspired world. Just assume everyone, if they were speaking in English to you, would have some form of accent. You don't have to do it.
Well, here's the thing: is like, is the accent the only indicator of their Asianness?
No.
And no, it shouldn't be. That's just lazy role playing, right? And again, here they do tell you, they're like, think about their style of dress, their hair, their facial hair, colors, fabrics, accessories. All of these things should be used to bring an NPC to life, like this section says. But people tend to lean into the voice. They tend to lean into that. Because they aren't given a lot of information on what people wear in Rokugan. What is the fashion like? What do the perfumes smell like? What are the common hairstyles? Does everyone have beautiful, long, luscious hair like Steve? Or do people have, like, short hair like me? Like, what is the common hairstyle? And they don't touch on that here. What people know are these, like, stereotypes that they see in pop culture. Right, and you know, that's and I think that's why they put a lot of emphasis into telling people not to do stereotypes. But what the writers could have done is literally fleshed out the real world of Rokugan and talk about food, talk about hair, dress, all of that, because that would have been super interesting to read through. I also hate how accents, and particularly when you're speaking, like, you try to speak English, but you have an accent, and how that is a sign of lower intelligence or lower status or something like that. I hate when people say that or think that, because I think the people who say that are also people who only speak one language. And when they mock people who speak with an accent, they're mocking somebody who can speak two languages. And so it bothers me when people think that an accent or speaking kind of broken English makes you a lesser person, when really, also, like, that person speaks two languages and you speak one.
Also, our perception of accents are just shaped by the society that we live in.
Absolutely.
Where certain accents are seen as cool or unique or sexy. Other accents are seen as awkward, and, you know, the feelings that we associate with accents are very indicative of where we live and what kind of biases we are exposed to.
Yep.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, look at The Simpsons. Look at Apu. Or look at like, okay, so look at Bob's Burgers. So Bob's Burgers has an East Asian character in it. He's another restaurant owner. I think his name's Tran. But anyways, do you know who they? Oh yeah, and the dentist, right? But there's but the dentist is played by Ken Jeong, who is East Asian. But the other restaurant owner in Bob's Burgers is East Asian, and he's voiced by Russell Peters.
Oh,
yeah,
okay.
Which I found out recently, and I was like, that's really odd. And he speaks with an accent. He speaks with the 3450, like he speaks with that accent. Whereas like Dr. Yap, Ken Jeong's character, sounds like Ken Jeong.
Keep in mind that just because you're a person of color does not mean you should necessarily imitate the accent of another person of color.
Exactly. And I get that like Russell Peters is a comedian and that's the kind of comedy that he does.
Yeah.
But that casting just doesn't make sense.
But that, some people might be okay with that, but other people might be very not okay with that. And I think, accents are a tricky thing to do.
Especially given that,
especially in a public forum, like a TV show or a stream game.
Yeah, especially given the fact that one of the lead writers on Bob's Burgers is Chinese. So I don't know. Kelvin Yu, shout out to him for playing Aziz Ansari's hot Asian best friend in Master of None, which I thought was a really underrated character.
Is he the CrossFit character?
No, he's just like his...
Oh, okay.
Aziz Ansari's character has like a hot best friend who's Asian, and he's just that's what he is.
Okay.
But you wouldn't see that as an Asian character, like a very
See, I felt really seen in that series because he has a friend who shows up for like brunch and he's like, "Hey, do you mind if we do some kettlebell swings here?" And he has a gym bag and he pulls out a fucking kettlebell and just starts doing some like. I'm like, all right, I see that. I see what you're doing here.
I feel seen. But anyways, let's move on because we've done 3 paragraphs. Do we want to read? I feel like we've got to read Dramatizing Bushido.
On another read here, as we were kind of going through, I don't think there's too much.
Mm-hmm.
I think it kind of gets summarized as kind of like Bushido has tensions, play within those tensions, and like that's quite good. Like definitely that's a good thing to put in the GM section. And they've already put that in the player section with the game of 20 questions.
20 questions, yeah. And your perceptions of Bushido as well as your clan and family's perceptions of Bushido as well. Then we have navigating status and hierarchy. I had highlighted it. I don't know why I highlighted it.
So it does talk about like cultural elements. So why don't I go ahead and read the first 2 paragraphs here and we can go from there. So navigating status and hierarchy. Rokugan's rigid social structure is another limiting factor on characters' actions. The characters are usually subordinates to one or more NPCs to whom they are expected to show proper deference and respect. And when characters are placed in positions of authority, they are expected to serve as role models for their own subordinates and follow certain customs to reinforce the status differentials between parties. These cultural elements represent a significant departure from the emphasis on forthright individualistic expression found across many contemporary real-world industrialized countries, with their reduced emphasis on class divisions and increasingly informal modes of address compared to those of ancient times. That was all one sentence. If players are interested in exploring these facets of Rokugani culture as opposed to glossing over them, the protocols and honorifics of this social dance can become additional levers for the GM to use in awarding honor and glory, or enforcing players to stake honor and glory to momentarily ignore social custom. More specifics about status and hierarchy may be found in further supplements. Did that ring anything for you, Daniel?
No, sorry. I'm a little slower today. I had a really long day at work. Also, I just got an email that I need to respond to.
Emma, I know you had thoughts too, though. So.
Yeah, go for it.
Let
me just catch up.
Fine. Whatever. I get that Rokugan is supposed to be like historic Japan. Fine, sure, whatever. This does not give a GM or players any real framework about how to go about this other than leaning in on those stereotypes and tropes that they've seen in other forms of media. Or if you go and find the further supplements.
I want you to buy the Emerald Empire book. I think it's like, hey,
well, it's just like, I think what Emma's saying is that they lead in, rather than talking about the hierarchies of feudal Japan and talking about like the shogun and the daimyo and the lords and the samurai and the relationship with like merchants and other classes in Japan, social classes and groups in Japan. Here they're just like social, like everything is very, very rigid, and there's honor and they lean in on the things that they've mechanized in this game, and that's honor and glory.
Yeah, and they're like, it's up to you, the GM, to determine that this is being done properly, but we're not going to tell you how to do that. So use what you already have in your brain somewhere.
I think they clumsily got to something that I think is actually really important to put into a book like this, and it's that the pillars of your morality, your ethics, if you're raised in like a Western industrialized, if you're well-educated and white, your ethics and morals will likely differ from someone who's of East Asian descent. Generally, you'll have the same idea, like you shouldn't do violence on people. That's pretty bad.
Mm-hmm.
But it really deviates in things like sanctity and things that are sacred. I had this recently in a playtest I was playing where the players were expected to destroy big slabs of jade for like hints and clues. And I remember on our debrief, I was like, if that was the thing, I don't think I would ever think about doing that, because jade is like not something you should like be breaking. That's like, it's like you have this thing of diamonds, like you shouldn't just break it. But even worse, because like it has something ingrained in me from my upbringing where I just don't want to break jade shit. That just seems like gross to do. It has what philosophers would call like a disgust reaction. I feel disgusted by that act. And I think that's what it's getting here, is that depending on how you grow up, there are certain things that just like will affect players in different ways, and you might not know about it. And that's good. It's just clumsy here because I feel like they didn't have enough to go off of.
Yeah, this section just feels like fluff.
But that one sentence is real weird, though. The forthright and individualistic expression found in most contemporary real-world industrialized countries.
It's a weird.
That's a weird thing to say, man.
Yeah, I didn't like.
And also,
that.
like, unless you've done an extensive linguistic and anthropological review, I don't feel like you should just be throwing a statement like that out there.
Someone's degree was showing, and they were like, "I'm going to throw that in there."
I think that person
I don't think anyone's degree was showing there.
No. Hold up. It's someone's degree, and they just. I mean, Emma, we all
they were
know,
good at their degree.
Emma, we all know people who are like this, who
Yeah,
have
but
these advanced
anyone who
degrees.
hasn't-
And,
I think
Yeah, they
anyone
could
who
have just
has an
said
advanced
Western
degree in
countries.
something like this wouldn't say something like that. But you know what? Whatever. You know, it's a weird sentence and not entirely accurate. And also, I don't know why it's in there.
yeah.
Chad has me thinking that, someone wrote down Western originally, like, whoa. If we can't just say like Oriental, you can't just say Western. And they're like, okay, fine, I'll put more words into it.
I mean, but that's what they're getting at. They're talking about Western countries, like dancing around it just with word vomit is just awkward.
And ignoring that, because we mentioned code switching before. There are different varying levels of formality even within Western English now. So like, it just doesn't make sense. Yep. All right. I think that's all I had for that. Yeah.
Sweet. I'm just looking at this story first group section just to see why it's nestled in here.
I really like that section. I think that's a really cool
For some groups,
thing.
playing the game is secondary to exploring their characters' motivations and fates, and the thrill of what happens next trumps the thrill of using particular combinations of techniques to defeat enemies. If your group falls into this category, you might consider one or more of the following. Techniques are reduced to purely narrative effects. Combat-related conflicts are mediated with a single roll, such as using the rules in one-roll duels. Intrigues are handled purely as roleplay, with the GM determining who prevails based only on what players say or describe their characters to be saying. I like that.
I feel like that would just be a normal game, but that's only because I've never played and I'm not drawn toward like the tables of numbers and
Well, there are some
Yeah.
games that are
Yeah.
like super numbers related. It's like you can move 30 feet and then you could take a called shot. And if you're taking a called shot at this part of the body, you get this kind of bonus.
Yeah,
I mean,
no,
but also-
L5R has like range bands and stuff for
Yeah.
combat that you can gloss over if you want to. It can be tactical to the degree of like D&D or Pathfinder if you want, but I think the games that I've played in have been more on the story side of things. Where
I think L5R leans to more story because of the court intrigue aspect of the game that people really seem to enjoy.
yeah,
I think if you wanted like, I don't think this markets itself as like tactical samurai combat. This is definitely like a court drama and
I'm reminded of
intrigue.
like, you know how like I don't know like anime series have like a subtitle or like Mobile
Yeah.
Suit Gundam. I'm like L5R tactical
Samurai
samurai combat.
Yeah.
No, tactical
just-
samurai combat. That's the trailer for that really bad movie Sucker Punch.
What was the original subtitle for like Metal Gear Solid, like tactical espionage or something like that?
Something like that, yeah.
Something like that, like tactical samurai combat.
And
feel
this-
Tactical
like-
espionage action, tactical
Okay.
samurai intrigue.
Nice.
oh,
I'm gonna take that title, Tactical Samurai Combat, and make it into a game that has nothing to do with any of those things.
well, there are so many weird little games that kind of do that. Emma, I just thought about this, and it's unrelated to L5R or tactical samurai combat action espionage intrigue court drama. And there's actually a like a TTRPG that involves knitting, and it's like a knitting storytelling
Interesting.
game. Yeah.
Huh.
Catching flies again,
Did you
Daniel?
get it?
I got it.
Nice.
Goodness.
+1 honor to you.
Yeah.
Honor.
Start carrying around chopsticks. Grab the chopsticks.
Yeah, I know, right? Once in a while, I have to show who's boss on stream. But let's move on. Steve, I know you wanted to talk about role-playing the spirits and approaching the supernatural.
So
Do you want to read this?
I'm not going to read it all because I don't think it's worthwhile. It's a full page of text here.
Yeah.
But what I'm happy to say is that this section here talks about how the supernatural is just that. It is beyond the natural world. And it goes into saying how the spirits and the supernatural elements will likely take on forms and aspects of the nature around them, like they are informed by nature. So spirits that are close by rivers and what have you might have like amphibian form, like scales, like that kind of stuff. That I think is really, really cool. I like that guidance here. One thing that it caused me some tension was that the text explicitly says use supernatural because they don't exist within the bounds of like natural law and physics. Use them to subvert your players' expectations. And when I saw that, I was like, oh, tell me more. Like, tell me how you want to guide players using supernatural. And there isn't much more. It's just kind of like, oh, this might be a really good way to kind of throw your players for a loop. And that might potentially make them think about creative solutions. And there's other texts where it says like you might have to overcome a supernatural obstacle through research, education, and talking to like, elders and whatnot. That's really cool, but it's missing a lot of the spirituality that is in spirits, and just the idea that everything is infused with like a sense of being. The ramifications of that and how you might view the world. And the way that it's presented here, it's presented in a very, in my opinion, very Western way, which is to say spirits are there outside of what it means to be a person. And if they're in your way, you need to figure a way to like work around them, or you need to figure a way to defeat the challenge.
Well, it's almost as
that-
if the supernatural is here to provide an adversary for the player or a
Yes.
means for the living to reach their goals or solve their problems. The spirits aren't here to coexist. They're here to serve a narrative, like a purpose for the players.
Suspect that some of this stuff might be better outlined in like books on the Shadowlands or books on the Celestial Realms, and that's just poorly laid out here. I find the supernatural to probably be the most interesting part of L5R personally, and I have a feeling that this is just like the bare minimum.
And there's
and it
gotta
is written
be-
from a Western standpoint.
Is there a book that covers more of was it the Falcon Clan, the one that hunts ghosts?
I don't think there's
the
one.
Falcons,
I don't think there's a Falcon Clan book specifically devoted to them just out now. I think they might be in like the Shadowlands book. I don't know. I don't know. Maybe in other editions of L5R.
Yeah. So I don't want to be too harsh on this section because we're looking for things that this book clearly wasn't aiming to do. We're looking for explanations and ways to play with how ghost stories affect how we view our own lives as mortal beings. We are looking for ways that the idea that spirits infuse the things that we interact with, more of like a Shintoist type situation. We're expecting like that kind of detail here. That may be in some lights unfair for this text, but at the same time, I think it's a fair critique to say that when you have a setting like this and you have these elements, that some people will expect that level of detail and that level of respect. This text fails to meet those expectations.
Yeah. Apparently Falcon Clan is in Shadowlands.
And Celestial Realms talks about
Realms.
spirits. So Celestial Realms was the book accompanying Wheel of Judgment, which is still the adventure I would like to check out someday.
I want to play L5R with you folks. I want to have an all Asian L5R game.
I want to have a streamed all Asian L5R game and like put it out there and watch the people be like, these Asians don't know how to play.
You're
L5R.
playing L5R wrong.
I don't know how much you know about Japanese culture, but I'm an expert.
Jeremy should have lost honor there, but didn't. Yeah, guaranteed. I still want to play it. Like I want to. Here's the thing: we talk about the negatives of L5R, and we've talked about the positives. But I think one of the things that is worth trying is actually playing the game itself. I'm not saying that y'all have to, but I would like to. In order to,
and I think Emma should be the GM and make us all anthropomorphic creatures.
Emma would just make us all cats.
With some crabs in there.
Cats and crabs. Oh, that could be a new game. Cats and
Cats
crabs.
and crabs on the wall. Tactical samurai combat.
Oh yeah, people still really want us to do that Haunted West thing. I said we were going to do it, and I have to do it. I do have a cast though for Haunted West. I haven't reached out to them yet, but I do have a cast.
They don't know.
So they don't know. Cast, but they don't know yet.
Well, they all asked me. And I was like, excellent. So yeah, I'm going to work on that once I have the energy.
Fair.
So yeah, let's move on then. So offering choices and determining consequences. This is just like your standard D&D stuff, except they talk about obviously like giving rewards of honor and glory. Standard TTRPG stuff over here. Oh, tactical groups. This is perfect for you, Emma. Tactical samurai combat.
Games also.
I was reading grittier games. I didn't even.
Yeah.
I just don't see the word tactical.
No, that's on the next page. That's on the next page.
Oh, okay. It's like tactical? Nah.
Grittier games.
Grittier games. Increase the
I think is
deadliness.
actually, in my opinion, yeah. So basically, everything is more deadly. You recover less frequently. Blah 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 blah. And this is honestly outside of cultural sensitivity. This is a pet peeve of mine. You're being gritty doesn't mean the game is more deadly.
No.
Grittiness is like an umbrella term, and what grittiness means to one person will change to the other, and this is like layer one. So I dislike this.
They could have renamed this into like here's how to play a mode of the game where combat is extremely deadly and is like a last resort.
They could have just called it lethal games. They could have just
lethal games, something like that. Yeah.
You know what'd be gritty? Fucking you go to dinner and you come back home and you have like a disease because the water wasn't fresh, and then you die the next day. Like that's gritty.
It's not like Zweihander, like Zweihander, yeah, or like Warhammer Fantasy role player.
Warhammer Fantasy and everything's Nurgle. I want that.
Yeah, there's a whole spiel that I have for another stream where it's like grittiness that you think the grittiness in RPGs is not grittiness.
People associate grittiness with combat. It's just combat. People are like, it's deadly combat. It's gritty. Or like, bloody violent. It's gritty. The art's all black and white. Gritty.
And honestly, a lot of grittiness often like hinges on like a little bit of classist stereotypes. It becomes very like poverty tourism, and like we need to talk about that, but not on this stream.
Yeah.
There was a cool fighting game series for the PlayStation 1 called Bushido Blade, which was like samurai combat, but if you got hit it was all about one hit with like a katana, and then that character would die. So a lot of the combat in the game was like feints and blocking and stuff like that. So there is potential for an interesting, like, quote unquote gritty or like lethal combat system that emphasizes defensive maneuvers and, you know, how to feel out your opponent, how to psychologically get in their head. But that's not what this is.
I just had the stupidest thought in my head when you were talking about that.
Yeah.
I said, in my head, I was like, oh, at least they didn't say, for gritty games, make everything black and white like a Kurosawa movie when you describe things.
Isn't that a mode?
That's too real. Yeah.
That's too real. That's a mode in Ghost of Tsushima, but I don't think they call it gritty mode. All right, let's move on. Then there were tactical groups, but that's not anything. There's a whole section on choice of words, erecting hurdles. They have.
So I do think we can skip most of the hurdles.
We could skip most of the stuff because it's like martial hurdles and investigative hurdles, social hurdles, logistical hurdles.
I will say in a game like this is really good for a GM to break down that, you know, when you're kind of making challenges, you don't have to make them all combat challenges. You don't have to make them all like court intrigue challenges. They give you 5 ways of doing it because 5 is a magic number for them, which is totally cool. It's on brand. So I actually really did like that they broke it down here. I think if you're a new GM, this is really, really what you're looking for.
Yeah, I think this is also the very similar to what games do, like Powered by the Apocalypse games do with like the GM moves and the hard and soft moves that a GM has. That's what this is. All right, so we're going to skip those. We have raising the stakes, and then we have using lords and duty. Duty.
Right? Every single time I hear
Every
it,
single time. Duty. This one might be worth reading simply because there's actually some world building in here.
There's a lot that it says about Rokugan as a world.
Yeah.
When it comes to like how the Lord is presented. Yeah.
So let's read this. So using lords and duty. In the game of 20 questions, players are asked to work with the GM to create a lord to whom they have a sworn duty. If a group of players is brand new to Rokugan, you could use this section to design a lord for them. If the group consists of veterans of the L5R setting, you may let the group create their own lords. 1 lord for the whole group. The game is easier to run if all characters are serving a single lord, as this means they all have the same broad objectives, those of their lord. In this style, all of the characters serve one clan, and usually a single family. In a single lord campaign, the GM develops adventures that hinge on the fortunes of that lord and their secrets hidden from outsiders due to the potential for shame or controversy. The single lord campaign style highlights interpersonal connections between the characters who are likely related through blood or marriage, have trained and served together for some time, or grew up in the same region and share memories of the same places and festivals. The GM should provide a group with a central home base, such as a castle, magistrate's manor, town, or religious site. There, the characters can receive their lord's orders, gather resources, and recuperate between excursions. GM should encourage players to personalize this home base to make it a memorable part of the game. This can also make the base a prime target for rival forces, escalating the drama. Okay.
I guarantee you, new players, if you grab 5 random new players, they will not be happy being the same clan. That's ridiculous to me.
Yeah, because they want to be like, well, look at all of us. We were like, oh, the Crab Clan's cool, and then you were like, I like the Scorpion Clan, and Jeremy's like, I'm playing a Lion Clan character, but I'd rather do something different. And then I don't know, Monty, have you ever said which clan you liked?
No clan. That's why I liked working on Path of Waves. I wanted to play.
Yeah,
Monty's a Ronin.
My dad came from like a fishing village, so you know, I feel like I have to represent that side.
This does alleviate a problem in some of the L5R games that I've played, where you're all Emerald Magistrate. Yeah, you're all Emerald Magistrates serving a different clan. You're expected to work together, but it feels a little disjointed. And plenty of other games have this problem too. D&D has the classic problem of, well, what are we doing? Why are we a party? Are we just like together for the thrill of colonizing goblin homes and taking their stuff, or are we actually have a purpose and a shared goal? So I see what they're getting at here. Like I like the idea
Well,
of
it's an
giving
easy
players
way
like
to create a
base,
plot hook. It's an easy way to create a plot hook.
But as Steve said, new players are gonna want to be different things.
Well, they also put so much effort into differentiating all the different clans, and then
it's the selling point.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I get it though. They could have just said everybody works for one lord, but could come from different clans.
You could
and it would still work.
be mercenaries.
Yeah.
You absolutely could be here out for a paycheck.
Yeah,
or alliances.
Or it could just be like, hey, we need your expertise. And the Emperor has decreed that a representative from, talk to all the players, these clans will work together on this assignment. And then they're going to be the lore people who'd be like, the Emperor would never do that.
I've been thinking for a while, like what I would do if I had to run an L5R campaign. And I would probably have it be like, I would ignore lore and just make there be like a huge war going on in the Shadowlands on the wall, where like everyone is tasked from whatever clan you're from is tasked to defend the wall. And so Crab Clan could be there, you know, Mantis, Crane, and the base would be the wall, or that this area bordering the Shadowlands. It would just be this like long-term generational war ongoing type thing, drawing inspiration from like Mobile Suit Gundam and like other stuff, and like Adventures in Middle Earth, which has an interesting concept to it, where it's like long-term campaigns take place in generations. Like your characters die, then you play as their children, and so on and so forth. Like that's what I would do. That the home base would just be the wall, and all intrigue would just happen there.
Yeah, and then you could really dive into the shared experiences of being at the wall, and of course the cultural differences between the different clans. And for me, I think of this as in like World War I. Think of all the different soldiers from all the different countries who occupied this and shared the same trenches.
Yeah,
and that shared experience.
What does defending the wall mean to you? What does it mean to your clan? What does fighting against
or why are you here? What does your clan offer?
Why are you here?
What does your clan offer? Like, are you Dragon Clan and you're here literally to report on what's happening, right? And you're here to report on what's happening, and you have a guide who is from the Crab Clan. But then you also brought your own protection because your lord has some sort of alliance with the Lion Clan, and you brought a Lion Clan member who's just this badass warrior. Like, you don't have to be from the same clan.
And I also think such an idea you could talk about like the emperor or like the courts up in the northern capitals of Rokugan, and talk about how there's a disconnect up there versus what actual soldiers are experiencing on the wall, because that really ties into like those World War I themes that you just spoke about, Daniel. But also it ties into what happened in history. Like if you look at the history of China, there was a big difference between what was going on in Beijing, the capital, versus what was happening in places like Guangzhou and like Hong Kong. When the Opium War was happening, there was a sheer disconnect in that, the Forbidden City didn't understand what was exactly happening in other parts of the realm.
It's also based on who's writing history.
Yeah, and it's based on who's writing history. So that's what I would do if I was running L5R as a campaign.
And Blake in our chat said, what about a special forces team of people from each clan? And I was just thinking, like Rainbow Six.
No. It's got to be some kind of squad of people who are down their luck, and maybe they're like, we don't care if we die if we squad. Suicide Squad is probably better for branding. Yeah, you're right.
A Suicide Squad.
There's something endearing about we don't care if we die squad.
That's what it can be called.
We don't care if we die squad. That's the next series, everyone. Actually, speaking of next series, if you listen to the new episode of the Asians Represent podcast, you'll get a little hint into a new series that Agatha and I are working on. I think it's going to be great.
Those like little hints and
I know, right? Daniel's like, I got a surprise for you.
# content. Okay, fine. Steve, do you want to know? Because I want people to listen to the podcast and learn from you.
Okay,
here we go. We talked about season 2 of Masks. Except it would be a wuxia game and not superheroes.
God damn.
Yeah.
All right. We got
happy, Steve? Are you happy? Are you happy?
I'm happy, but also but also tense. But maybe we'll move on to some multiple lords for the group.
Let's talk about multiple lords for the group. I can read that one.
Sure.
Although the single lord game is easier on a GM, players often gravitate towards the multi-lord campaign because each player has a favorite clan they want to represent. Okay, yeah. This is by far the most common way to play L5R, but it requires the GM to create a context in which it makes sense for the characters to come together and stay together over the course of several scenarios. Two good ways to tie a group together are to create shared goals or circumstances. The GM can use both in tandem to glue the party together even more firmly. See conflicting duties, blah, blah, blah. Okay, so exactly what we said. So then we have shared goals. I feel like we could skip this part.
We can probably skip shared goals and shared circumstances.
Yeah, but we should.
I found the headings to be like quite clear.
Yeah, I want to look at this Imperial Offices and Ministers. So on the red sidebar, they have connecting Gary to a lord. A lord's retinue and servants may include any number of player characters, as well as all the other non-player characters whom the lord relies on to execute their duties. These supporting characters can be a source of allies or rivals, sometimes at the same time, for the PCs. A specific task that would fall to a member of a lord's retinue is a good example of a Geary for a good player. So they have to connect it to the game mechanics. But then here they have these little Imperial Offices and Ministers. And I just wanted to know what everyone thought about that. So they have like the Office of the Jade Champion, oversees the enforcement of imperial laws against heresy and sorcery, currently not filled. This is an interesting piece of world building here. The reason why I like this is because when you're actually trying to engage in all of these different factions, like even in D&D, right? Like there are all those, like the Harpers and all of the different social groups that have their own goals, but they never flesh them out in such a succinct way where it's like, yes, you are a member of the Imperial Cartographers sent to go beyond the wall into the Shadowlands to map everything out, map an uncharted part of the lands beyond the walls, and they've brought with you a Dragon Clan member, a Crab Clan guide, a Lion Clan sort of fighter character, and the Mantis Clan because there's a river or something that you have to sail down. I don't know. But I like this. I really like that they've included this because they've provided you with a couple of prompts on how to bring everyone together. And then what they've done is they've given you a little bit of context as to who in world may bring the group together. I wanted to point that out because I thought it was really neat. All right.
Or you could all work for the Census Bureau.
Yeah,
so just be like middle managers.
So bureaucratic.
Pencil pushers.
And for me, that's what this section was missing, because as it is, it's great. It gives you world building, it gives you some titles, and like, that could be fun. What it's missing is like, why do they like the so what?
Yeah.
So what? There's like position has been filled. That's a good so what, right? Like,
yeah, and I think
other
they
ones
put a little bit of information because they don't want to tell you how to use the Census Bureau. That's why.
Right. But the Census Bureau could absolutely have a problem. And we're not telling the GMs, this is how you should direct your players to solve that problem. It is saying to the GM, they have a problem. And if you so choose, you can like present that problem to players. And if they hook onto it, that's a great campaign to have.
Well, there is one. There's the Office of the Jade Champion, oversees law enforcement of imperial laws against heresy and sorcery, currently not filled.
Exactly. I think it's really, really good. That's the direction I would like to see all of the titles to have.
And they send a representative from every clan to work because nobody trusts one clan taking over because they don't want them to be in charge of the Office of the Jade Champion. So you get this like multi-clan suicide squad doing
Don't care
stuff.
if we die squad.
Don't care if we die squad. Okay, so let's move on. Do we want to do creating a lord? Because I feel like this is the same as creating an NPC.
It, to much degree, it kind of was.
Yeah, it's creating an NPC, but with the, I guess, the added layer of them having sub-NPCs beneath them.
It also had more like tables for you to like randomly generate a lord for
Yeah.
ways that their demeanor and their way of interacting with players might be somewhat complex.
Mm-hmm.
That was kind of interesting. I know some GMs really benefit from random tables like that. Like they need that seed to do it, and which is totally valid.
Yeah.
But not much culturally to talk about, in my opinion.
Yeah, I think I've been thinking. I recently was thinking about like, well, what do I like for an NPC? What do I want for an NPC here? And for a lord here, they're like, okay, your lord has to have complications. They have to have their own NPC resources, agendas, qualities, but they never talk about like, well, what are the lords? What's the lord's, sense of morals? What do they sound like? What is their appearance? They don't tell you that here. Find that a little odd. But anyways, they go through creating a lord, conflicting duties. Then they have looks like different levels of society. So they have ministers and governors, provincial and family daimyo. Provincial and family daimyo, and then they have this red box on page 295 with clan offices and ministers. This is a lot of information, and then they go into running the game. Do we want to cover anything on pages 294 and 295? I think it's all skippable.
The only thing that I see out of all of this is like, here's all these roles. Nomenclature varies among clans, particularly with the unicorn, because they've absorbed organizational traditions from other cultures. It's like, here's a little thing, no explanation, bye now.
Yeah.
Yeah, but like, I don't have anything to elaborate on there. Just like, here's some stuff that just seems normal. Here's a complication that we're not going to help you with.
Mm-hmm.
It was quite heavy on information, and even as someone who like has run RPGs and this kind of like theme, it was kind of like, so what? Like I was really struggling to figure out how I'm going to use this in a game. But maybe it's useful after you run your first 10 games. I don't know.
Yeah. Let's skip this and move on. So, do we need to go through running the game? Because this isn't like
so immediately. Sorry, Daniel. I got
no,
really
go ahead.
excited.
No, go ahead. Go.
I got really excited because I want to talk about the first red text on page 296, which
building
is
trust.
Trust.
Yeah.
Oh, that title right there, and then tells me this is what I want to read.
So let's read this. The game works best if neither the GM nor the players attempt to create gotcha moments or use the rules to entrap the other party in a contradiction. It is fundamentally not a competition between the GM and the players, if for no other reason than the GM wields final authority over the rules, and it operates most harmoniously when the rules are used to collaborate and tell a good story that everyone enjoys. Just take that section and stick it right in the D&D.
Monty, did you write that?
That's what they did in Tasha's.
That's what they did in Tasha's, but they also were like, you know what you could do? You could just ignore the racism that's in D&D or the bioessentialism that's in D&D. Just ignore it. We're not going to do anything. Just ignore it. Monty, did you write this?
Oh, well, I didn't work on the core book.
Okay.
I was just saying, this is like such. This is so good. That
This is
Monty,
great.
I thought this was you because it was so good.
But again, you can tell when there are different authors working on different sections, because this is like, oh, this is so thoughtful and well written, clear. It's clear, it's concise, and then there's like all the other sections that we really disliked.
This is a very interesting blue text on page 300. I don't know if we'll get there tonight, but
I mean, we could just go there now if it's related.
It's not really related, but it's on the topic of like this side text being quite intriguing.
Now I want to see what it is.
A lot
so
of
much of the side text, I feel like, is more important than the primary text that they're putting in places. Like last week when it wasn't side text, but there was that chunk about like, oh, I'm blanking. There was something where it's hidden in the GM section, but it's relevant to how the whole table plays, about like not making people uncomfortable. This is another one of those where it needs to be not a little red sidebar. It needs to be earlier for everyone to see. And like, a primary thing instead of a side note to the GMs.
Imagine an RPG where something like this is a one-page spread. It's a very little text, but surrounded by art, and like it's stylized in such a way that like it evokes an emotion, and that's a goal. I think
a one page
put that energy out in the world.
Hold up,
see what
a
happens.
one page RPG that evokes emotion.
I was thinking more of like you have this book that's for this RPG because there's a lot in it, but there's one page dedicated. It's given the space to say things like, you should collaborate on your stories and make them fun for everyone.
Yeah. I think that's the direction a lot of newer books are moving towards.
It certainly is.
It's certainly the trend.
It's a good thing. It's the trend. It's a good thing. I think I don't know. I think like the newer editions, like Numenera, might have something in there about this. Pathfinder Second Edition has this too. Tasha's has this. The umpteenth book of 5th edition has this in the DM's section in the back. But yeah.
I think we should do is flip to, was it page 299 in the red side text, because this ties in with that building trust. Talking about entrapping players.
Yes.
This one, it says creating satisfying. So it's building tension. Steve's favorite word.
I started using it in my business life too. I started using tension with clients, and
I've started using it more because of you, Steve. Like,
it's actually wonderful. That word has so much connotation and weight with it that it like is opening so many doors from a business perspective. That business Steve is telling y'all, use the word tension in a meeting and just see what happens.
Well, you know what Starcross was originally called.
Yeah,
it's called tension.
Yep.
Okay, building tension. Creating satisfying discord doesn't mean trapping your PCs in an unsolvable problem where one has to defeat the other. Conflicts between characters are often best when they are a matter of give and take, with each character winning on some accounts and losing on others. Alternately, you can prepare a common enemy, perhaps underlying cause for both complications, who the PCs can rally against at the end, diffusing the tension. I like how they kind of give you a tip on how to, get people to work together, but still be at odds with one another, because difference between characters makes for a very interesting story and growth and progression. But how they encourage the GM to, have the players overcome something together, which I think is really great here. Then there's also that section on character death and retirement, and I really wanted to read it because I was hoping that there isn't anything about like seppuku, harakiri, or anything like that, and it doesn't seem like there is. I think character death is something that very few RPGs do well. We talked about it last week when I've talked about Burning Sands and like roguelikes. But in games that aren't a roguelike, how do you handle character death, and how is character death best handled in a respectful way? And I want to pose that question to, well, I guess not Emma in this case, but Steve, Jeremy, and Monty. Like, how do you like death to be handled in an RPG, in like a TTRPG?
I would actually like to hear Emma's thoughts after we.
I want to do the people who have played before, and then I want to see what Emma thinks.
I'm happy to go into this because my my home game group, we play Dungeons & Dragons 5e. We play them for a while now. One of our controversial lines is that characters can't die. And I was like, so like you never want a character to die, and it exists. After we talked about it more, it exists actually outside of a line. We've decided that it is actually a group decision whether or not someone actually dies narratively. So if someone gets reduced to 0 hit points and they would normally die, we decide as a group outside of the games, like, was this their time to die? Like, is this the story we want to tell? And it hasn't happened yet, but we had that discussion, and there is still exists a little bit of tension here. But in general, everyone seems to be able to move on with the game, with the idea that if it were to happen within the rules, we would talk about it and talk about what would be the most fun and fulfilling for us. So death in my games is a conversation.
Yeah. Jeremy?
In my games, I've had death in a couple of my D&D games, and it tends to be like a pivotal story moment. If it happens without being planned, or even if it, the there have been a few cases where a player has talked to me that they want to retire their character, and so it's usually a pivotal story moment. I have resurrection magic in my games, but I use Matt Mercer's optional resurrection rules where, like, if you want to resurrect the character, you have to go through an elaborate ceremony. Everyone has to make an offering. You really get into role playing. How are your friends going to contribute to this magic to potentially bring you back to life? And those are usually like very key moments in the story where I will stop whatever the ongoing thrust of the narrative is and being like, okay, you guys want to resurrect your comrade now. You got to go through this, ritual and actually role play it out. And so I try to, and I also, another thing that I do is I stole the concept of, the how do you want to do this thing from Matt Mercer to apply, like if you're going down, if you're dying in combat, how do you want to do this? How would you like to fall in combat? How would you like your moment to actually be if you want to die at this particular time? And it's been successful so far. And on the one occasion where it was so funny, I was teaching a group of newbies how to play D&D, and the first combat they encountered, actually a character did die, but then they got like swept away into the Shadowfell and whatnot, and that character was like temporarily brought back to life by like the magic of the Shadowfell. But when they got out of the Shadowfell, the character, unfortunately, the magic sustaining them, they actually did die. And then their death became like the focus of like the next campaign. The next campaign was, how do we resurrect this friend of ours? And like everyone banded together to go on, a quest to find the things they needed to, bring back their friend. And so it became the major thrust of the narrative.
See, that's the ideal D&D game, when your players are the ones driving the story and the GM is kind of reacting and shaping the world around what the players really want. I really like that. How about you, Monty?
Yeah, I mean, the way I handle it is pretty much similar to Steve and Jeremy's. Like, death has to be kind of consensual with the player. Is this something that they want to happen in the character? And it's one of the reasons why I've stopped like running games that don't give you many tools to address that. I mean, I could probably literally say D&D. I mean, I know they have resurrection, I know there's like all this GM tools, but it really sucks if there's a random roll and somebody's dead and like for 2 hours they're not doing anything, or even if playing like an NPC, they've lost that connection to the story of the game and the character. And I see role-playing games very similar to like the storytelling of like novels and stuff, like, where the randomness, there shouldn't be randomness in that regard. So, yeah.
Yeah, I don't like the idea of killing off a player's character in the middle of combat because it feels cheap, but it also takes somebody out of the game because people are there you're there to have an experience together. And, oftentimes combat can be really exciting for people and they want to participate. That's why I always kind of like fudge my rolls. I'm like, didn't hit you. Or like, not enough damage to kill you, right? Because it makes it more interesting. And it can create that tension and that urgency. It can get other, like having players near death can get other characters to act, right? And do dramatic things. Or players who are put in compromising positions might try something new, try something dangerous, might try something risky because they think they have nothing to lose. And that's room for character growth. Also, like Jeremy, like you said, like death is really not the end, right?
Yeah,
like a character who dies can always come back later.
Can come back, or you can create a meaningful story through their death that really brings both meaning to the original character and then the group that they were, adventuring with. I came up with the whole concept of a second campaign based on the fact that one character died in the very beginning of when we started playing together, and that shaped the whole narrative over time. And so character death and character retirement, because retirement is also interesting.
Yeah, I was going to get to that one next, because you can,
when someone decides to leave, to have their character leave this group, that can be fascinating as well. Who joins in their place? does whenever I start like a new campaign with my players, I always like to encourage folks to be like, you can make any character you want, but let me know, forge some kind of connection with your previous character. It can be like they bumped into each other on the street, or maybe your character was like a bard and the next character you're playing is like a groupie or a really, major fan, or like a student or a teacher. Like let's forge a connection there and see how the story advances based on that connection.
Yeah, in Urban Shadows, your characters can get corrupted, and corruption is one of the ways that you can actually get more powerful in a way, like leveling up. But when your character hits a certain point in their corruption, they kind of give into their darkness that's in them, and they become an NPC. And it's kind of a way, it's a means of character retirement.
Yeah.
I also like the idea of a character being like, after that encounter, maybe you didn't die, but maybe after that encounter, your character might think, maybe this life isn't for me anymore. And you retire, having all of the knowledge that you've had, and you could always revisit that character and their experiences. And you drive off into the sunset, like what they did with Paul Walker's character in Fast and Furious.
Yeah, I made one of my former characters, one of my former players' characters, like a bard. He didn't want to play anymore, into the first NPC that the new party meets in their second campaign, like a major NPC,
or like
20
a
years
villain,
later.
or a villain.
Yeah, that villain's cool too.
Yeah, and like in quarantine since March, I have lost 3 characters, and I have been okay with all but one of those deaths, because one of them I got killed by another player by accident. Yeah, when he was out having a smoke, it wasn't even his role, and it killed me. But every other character death has been great. I played a character in our Bamboo in the Dark stream, and I literally talked to the player who was going to murder my character at the end. Before we even did any of the stream, I was like, hey, I'm okay with you killing me because I think it would make for really good character development for this character. I'm okay with you killing me at the end to make it interesting. And like I consented to it, and I in fact encouraged it. Like players need to have these conversations as well. PvP is something we haven't talked about, but anyways. Emma, question goes to you. If you were playing your very first tabletop RPG, what would character death look like to you, and what would you want that to be?
Is it possible to transform into an animal?
Yeah, there you go. It's just there. Yeah, you become one with nature. Like we
continues to follow the group around, but can't really do a whole.
I think that's
very cool.
Yeah. I would 100% let that in, like any D&D group, any RPG group. If someone was like, "That's what I want had to happen," I'm like, "Fuck yeah!"
So like in a reincarnation sense, right?
Yeah. Or like a temporary transformation, and then if ever there's a way to transform back and be alive again,
you turn into a different animal while your spirit kind of recharges.
I don't know.
Or soul, something happens. I love that.
There's transformation instead of death, I guess.
Emma, I feel like if you're my players, if you wanted to do that, I would absolutely talk 100%. About like, do you want to go through like kind of like this Nirvana Buddhist kind of like, do you want to struggle through like being an animal for a little bit? Like, is that something that you want to talk about? Because we can. And like, I think it's very rich. I love that.
Or it could also go into like, Jeremy's idea of the quest to resurrect a character. Like, this character has turned into an animal. We have to take this animal to this particular geographic location, right? To this mangrove or to the top of this mountain. We need to take the player gets turned to a mountain goat, and we need to escort this mountain goat to the highest peak in the land.
That's cute.
They're a squirrel now. Don't let them get eaten.
Yeah, they're a squirrel now. And wait, golden eagles are everywhere.
Speaking of Matt Mercer, he did make an optional D&D class called the Lingering Soul, which is if you die, you turn into a ghost. It's not really balanced, but it's a cool concept. Like you're a ghost, and you get bound to an item, and you're still with your party, but you are a ghost now, and you do ghostly things, but with your party. It's intriguing.
Or what if
inspired by 3.5,
the spiritualist,
the risen martyr.
Oh yeah,
there's the spiritualist in Pathfinder as well. That's very similar.
Yeah.
In the risen martyr, you have to die for it. I don't know if that's the same.
No, the spiritualist, it is a starting class. So you don't lose a character, but you have a spirit that becomes part of you. I like the idea.
It's a cool character, and the iconic character is like an old lady.
It's an old lady
which you never see in role-playing games.
Yeah, fair.
Pathfinder's got dope art.
unless they're the hag, which is there's a lot to unpack
No,
about.
this is not a hag.
That's
That's
different.
an
This is
old
just
woman.
an old woman. I
Right.
I love the idea of a character dying and then becoming a spirit that maybe is harnessed by another character who is a part of their family in a form of like ancestor worship, which would work for me because that is central to Chinese culture. So that would make sense.
There's a 3.0 D&D setting called like Ghost Walk, I think.
Yeah, Ghost Walk.
Where,
I
yeah,
Love
where
Ghost Walk.
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
dope.
with a ghost character class you can take when you die and stuff. So
I love it. Yeah.
There is some really good stuff in 3rd edition D&D.
Daniel, if you were to kill my character in Dungeons and Asians,
I was thinking about it.
I would totally be. Of course you are.
No.
I would actually kind of be okay with it because we've woven enough that if my character were to die, if I were to roll up a new character and whatnot, the echoes of that character would be far-reaching to such an extreme extent, and I would be very willing to like play through that story.
Well, I think if I killed Dongfeng, people would just stop listening.
Yeah, that's fair.
I think if I killed Waleed, people would similarly stop listening because they want to know more. Like you said, like Ning has been challenged so many times so far in the series, and like especially with the latest episode that isn't out yet. I'm still editing. But I think if Ning died, I think your next character would be greatly affected by Ning's actions.
Absolutely.
Like, I think I would only kill off Ning in Dungeons and Asians if that resulted in huge political upheaval in Xia. That's the only way I would do it. Or if you wanted to die.
Yeah. I think Ning has a couple more arcs to like really flesh out like a true story of what it means to be a woman of color in her position.
Yeah.
And then once I tell that story, there's more to tell, but I'm willing to hang that up for a little bit and like tell a different story.
Well, I also see Ning as a character who could be retired and become an NPC because Ning has a place in the world, like a place of authority, like a lord. I could see that happening, or Ning retiring and leaving the sovereign banner because of how she's seen the government's impact on the people of the kingdom and be like, I don't want this life for me. I'm going to retire and travel abroad, or I'm going to go, visit this land. I'm going to go spend time in Daesh, or I'm going to go to Song, the land of rivers, and be down there. And you're like, I'm going to retire Ning temporarily, and then maybe Ning comes back in the future. But right now, you're going to play this new character.
Yeah.
Right? And maybe your character is looking for Ning.
Yeah.
Who knows? But yeah, thank you for telling me that, because again, these conversations are super important to have.
This was a good tangent. I love this.
This is a very good tangent. We only have 10 minutes left. Where were we? Okay, so we were on page 296 to start, and then we jumped ahead a bit. Then there's like stuff with elemental like options. And that's basically like, that's the equivalent to being like, this doesn't have to use strength, and it can use dexterity or wisdom or any of your other abilities.
If you go through the technique section, and especially with like the skills and what have you, they do a really good job of explicitly talking about how these skills can be used with different elements. And I found that to be very rich. I found it to be very repetitive, but rich. So, this is a good section to have here.
Yeah, it tells you to play the game you want to play and use your strengths to solve problems, or one person's strength can't be the only solution to a problem. Is basically what they're saying here in just a very long-winded way.
Yep.
Yeah. Stop me if there's anything. So I highlighted the applying advantages and disadvantages, but I think we've spent a lot of time talking about them already. Like 2 hours and more.
No. Yeah, I didn't have much to add. You're right.
And then this is what is that symbol again? Is this
Opportunity?
Opportunity. Oh yeah, of course, opportunity right there. Do we want to read this section, or should we just keep going?
In my opinion, this section here is just more fluff to like give you context,
It's
tell you to go look at it, to look at a table.
Yeah.
Basically. I liked how it tells you opportunity can be whatever you want it to be. You can use it to be part of the story. And here's the table in case you can't think of anything. I like how it also tells players if your player can't think of an opportunity, you can go back to the table as well. That was really, really nice.
I want to talk about XP with everyone.
Okay, yeah, advancement, yeah.
I want to talk about XP, and that's on the same page as character death and retirement, awarding XP. Mostly because I want to know what all of you think about character experience and encouraging character growth. So one of the things we talked about on the upcoming episode of Dungeons and Asians is how the characters level up. In Quest, the game we're currently playing, at the end of every session, you get a new ability. So there aren't really levels. You never increase your health or anything like that. You just get a new ability, and Steve's character has an ability that's hella OP, but it's super cool. I love it. But at the end of our last session, we said, okay, well, everyone should have a new ability, but maybe we should wait until there's a point in the narrative when we can do that level up, when we could have that training montage. I want to ask Steve, Jeremy, and Monty, and then Emma how you would do it in a hypothetical, how you like to award XP, or if there's a game that you enjoy that you model, XP reward off of. So what do you?
I went first. I'm happy to go again, but
oh yeah, if anybody has one, Monty, go ahead.
I can go. Yeah. This is my personal thing. I really don't like GM fiat experience point systems where I have to decide how much I'm awarding, because I feel like I'm being a jerk if I'm like not giving them enough, or so this is one of the reasons why I'm like really big on like the Apocalypse World systems, because they build in the XP system, how you earn it, so I don't have to make any decisions and it's just part of the game, and like everybody is aware how it works and there's no arguments about how it works. So that's just my personal opinion.
Yeah, I can echo that. Like systems that build in experience in a gradual and a natural curve are just better than levels, which I think are an outdated concept. Like I like how Call of Cthulhu does it. If you succeed on a roll, you mark that down on your sheet, and at the end of the scenario, then you check to see if those particular skills level up.
Is it if you fail or if you succeed?
It's if you fail the roll.
Fail the roll, you mark
fail the roll, you level up. It's meant to stimulate you learn through failure, and it builds in natural advancement. As far as like a game that uses levels, I find leveling to be an outdated concept, but if I'm going to run a system with levels, it'll be milestone leveling. Everybody levels up at the same time when you reach certain story points, and I will often coincide those story points with some kind of narrative thrust to say, okay, you're getting your subclasses now. You just happen to go to this massive, library or training grounds where it's a chance for you guys to all learn together. Or if I can't do that, I'll just flat up give my players something to look forward to and be like, okay, you guys are hitting like level 6 tonight.
I need a break, level up.
Yeah. And, I'm not a fan of like you gain 500 XP from like killing these orcs or whatever, because that feels like that really brings out in my mind, the video gamey aspects and like the grind. Like, oh, we need to grind. We need to farm some, do some side XP. Quests. Yeah. I like to get away from the concept of side quests, farming, grinding, high difficulty levels, low difficulty levels whenever I run any type of game.
That's my least favorite part about writing D&D is calculating the right XP, because I think players can face any challenge, or things can be too dangerous for a player, but I don't want to have to be like, okay, so at this point they should have 500 experience points, and if you have this many people in your party, that means that they get this much, and by the end of it, they get this. I don't like to think like that.
I mean, like Rime of the Frostmaiden has basically thrown that out, and it's just like, okay, the player's like level 5 here. Yeah. Or they gain enough XP after finishing this quest to hit level 6.
Mm-hmm. Steve, how about you? What do you like?
I think if you're going for the power fantasy, if the fantasy you're trying to weave is like, we get stronger, we get so strong, it's unbelievable. Levels are great, because it gives the player that carrot on a string, where it's like you at some point you're gonna get this amazing ability, and it's written in the text, and like you can like look forward to that. And L5R, I think, is a power fantasy in many, many ways. So the idea that you get awarded XP, you can save it up and you can like spend it, and when you get that ability, like it feels so good. Like, I get what they're going for, and that is totally a valid play experience.
Oh, 100%. It's closer to that game. It's you want to put yourselves in situations where you are going to get experience. And in D&D, it's often combat. in L5R. I don't think I think they're very purposeful in saying you can get experience from the social combat, the court drama.
Yeah, social combat.
Yeah.
But it's still a power fantasy, even in the court drama. It's like, do I have the power, and will I get more? And that's valid. Like, totally do that if that's your jam. But there are many, many games out there that do not have a power fantasy. So if you play like For the Queen, clearly there's no power fantasy. Like, you are just like exploring what it means to love a queen and whatever it means to love. If you're playing StarCraft or Tension, because you mentioned it, then there's no power fantasy. You're looking at what it means to have a relationship, intimacy with another person. So leveling. Could you imagine a game of Tension where you gained a level? Like, that's ridiculous. That is
level up. Let's add another Jenga tower on top of this one.
Like, that is the most ridiculous notion, and like that's what I'm trying to get at here. Where leveling up has its place. I think L5R, it does fit, but there are many, many other places where it just doesn't.
Yeah, and I think that's why I like Quest, because you do get stronger, and if with modification it becomes situational. The one that I really like is Coriolis. So in Coriolis, at the end of every session, you have to answer 6 questions. And these questions, every time you say yes, will give you a point of experience. But none of these questions directly relate to combat or anything like that. They can be the result of combat, but they are all based on story. So the first one is, did you participate? Like, were you present in the conversation? I think that's really important, because I'm sure all of us who have played TTRPGs, those of you who are watching on Twitch or on YouTube, and of course those of us who are in a conversation, have played a game where there's one person who's there and they just want to do the combat, and they kind of tune out when the spotlight's not on them, right? So did you participate? Then there's like, did you overcome a difficult challenge to help the group meet its current goal? Love that. Then there's, did you put yourself or your crew at risk because of your personal problem? So any of the entanglements, the advantages, disadvantages that you have, did that put other people at risk? Did that make things spicier? Right? And I don't have these memorized. I have it pulled up. Did you learn something new about yourself or another PC? Right? This encourages people to grow in front of others. Did you sacrifice or risk something for your PC buddy? Each character has to have a closer connection with another PC. And the last one is, did you act in accordance to your icon? Now, in this game, having an icon is like having a god, and everybody has faith. So were you faithful? And that one can be switched to really pretty much anything. But you gain XP for role playing in this game. Putting others at risk could be starting a gunfight and having combat. But you could sacrifice for somebody by like taking a bullet. Or it could just be, saying the wrong thing in front of the crime lord, or, upsetting a very powerful business person. Right? I like XP to be awarded in milestones, like many of you have said. But I like those milestones to be influenced by like tangible things, like creating tension, like getting past conflict. Emma, if you were to play a TTRPG, one where if you die, you turn into an animal, let's build upon this game. How do you get XP in your game?
I have no idea.
And that's okay.
I think even if I played a TTRPG, I wouldn't be thinking about experience. Because when I play video games, I don't.
Yeah.
I just play. Definitely, there are ones that I probably enjoy less because they're grindy, but I wouldn't be like, oh, this technical system something or other, I don't like how it does this. It's like, nah, I just didn't enjoy it. So I don't think about those things. Yeah.
That's a valid answer, right? You don't want an XP system. I love that. So it's 9:00. Like last time, I really enjoyed this conversation because we talked about things we liked, things we didn't like, and we provide solutions for people and examples of things that were great. Options, right? I have everybody's socials on the screen. DM Steve, Monty_Lynn, Pixel Grotto, Starchiologist, and Daniel H. Kwan. Again, in terms of announcements, check out that rebrand. If you're on our Discord, let us know if you want a different name for Noodle Dragon, if you like Noodle Dragon. I'm still on the fence about the wrap up. I really like it and the imagery that it evokes when you think about food that way. I kind of want to move forward with that, but I want to talk more with everyone else about it. Steve, Emma, Jeremy, Monty, and Sar in spirit, like, please take care of yourselves. This is, a tough time in the year. It's the holidays. It's darker outside. Toronto, Steve and Emma, Toronto, we're back in lockdown in 3 days. Toronto's back in lockdown. So that means no indoor dining, no gyms, no social gatherings outside of your homes. So times are getting tough. And I just want to make sure that everyone here, just takes care of themselves and take some time to take care of other people in our community. Because, 2020 is tough, but we're getting through it together. That being said, if you have any suggestions for Asians Represent, for Asians Read, for Critical Read, for the wrap up / It's Friday / Keep Trying, you can hit us up on social media at AZNS Represent. Make sure you are following us on Twitch. I want us to get to 1,000 Twitch followers by the end of the year. So if you want to be notified when we go live, when our new series is out, anything like that, make sure you are a follower. It costs nothing. That being said, take care, folks. I'm going to be hanging out in our Discord, I think, probably playing some games. We've been doing that a lot lately, playing some Smite, playing some Rainbow Six. Everyone on the Discord helped me beat Hades. That was...
There's a lot of yelling.
There was a lot of yelling. It was like 2 in the morning. Steve, Adam, Ali were just insulting me and talking shit to keep me motivated. It was consensual. It was fantastic. That was one of the most triumphant video game victories I think I've ever experienced, and it was because of our community and how awesome everyone is. Now, speaking of Discord, we are currently not taking on any new members, but we are looking for mods. So if you're interested in being a mod on our Discord community and you are already in that Discord community, please let me know. Please don't message Steve, Jeremy, Monty, or Emma. Message myself or Agatha on the Discord. Agatha is Mighty Shrimp, double Y. We are prioritizing, obviously, Asian mods, and particularly those who identify as female or non-binary. So let us know. Get in touch with us. Message us privately if you have any questions. We cannot grow our community unless we can ensure, or we are unwilling to expand our community unless we can ensure that everyone is safe. So in order to do that, we need more mods. So let us know. Anyways, take care, folks. We will see you tomorrow. Tomorrow. Al-Qadim stream, tomorrow, noon, Eastern. Join in, get ready. They're talking about, it's been tough. But I think once we get past this session, I think it will get better in terms of less cringy for what's written. We'll see. I'm trying not to.
Sure?
No, because there's stuff. I'm looking forward to it, but also like I'm steeling myself emotionally. I'm just getting ready for it. Yeah. But anyways, take care of yourselves, folks. We'll see you on the Discord. We'll see you on social media. We'll see you at the next stream. Bye, everyone.
Bye.